Top 15 gems that collapsed in value. What really happened? There was a time when a single gem could change a family's fortune. Prices soared, auctions fought over carats, collectors flew across continents to see just one stone under a jeweler's loupe. And then, everything collapsed. In this episode, we examine 15 gemstones that once carried promises of prestige, rarity, and generational wealth, only to lose it all. Not over centuries, not gradually, but overnight due to market fraud, synthetic confusion, failed treatments, collapsed mines, or global shifts in demand. These aren't just stones. They are economic cautionary tales of hype, of speculation, and of how fragile the value of a gem can be when perception cracks. Each one on this list was real. Each one was desired. And each one at some point was considered an investment, until it wasn't. Join us as we uncover the forgotten auctions, supply scandals, and chemical truths behind these 15 gemstone collapses. Because in the world of gems, brilliance isn't enough to survive. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 15th, Andesine, the market collapse that started with a lie. Not every gemstone collapsed because it ran out. Some collapsed because it never truly existed. At least not in the way the market was led to believe it did. In the early 2000s, a vivid red gemstone began circulating through Western jewelry networks. Labeled as red andesine from Tibet, it was said to be a natural feldspar, formed in volcanic zones, colored by nature, rivaling the brilliance of spinel or sunstone. It was marketed as rare. It was priced as if it were a rare item. Retail listings reached $1,200 per carat. Shopping channels sold it in bulk, branding it with names like Volcano Feldspar or Sacred Fire Ruby. And all across the U.S., buyers believed they had discovered something new, something real, but something didn't add up. No official mine location had ever been verified. There were no public surveys, no satellite imagery, no export permits, just vague origin labels. Tibet, China, Congo. Labs issued certificates that listed it as Andesine, but without treatment disclosure, because at the time, they couldn't detect what was hidden inside. That changed in 2008. A coalition of independent gemologists, including John Emmett, Richard Hughes, and Henry Henney, launched a private investigation. They acquired red andesine from multiple sellers and subjected it to destructive analysis. The results were unambiguous. The stones were not naturally red. They were diffusion treated with copper, a process where pale labradorite is heated under intense pressure with copper ions, forcing artificial color into its outer layers. It wasn't fraud at the origin. It was fraud in the middle, by suppliers who knew the stones were treated and sold them as natural anyway. The fallout was swift and brutal. Jewelry networks pulled inventory, certificates were rescinded, buyers filed lawsuits, and the value of the red andesine market dropped by over 90% in less than a year. Today, no central gemological institute accepts red andesine at face value. Even untreated andesine, which occurs in pale yellow and gray, is commercially unsellable simply because the name has become radioactive. Andesine didn't collapse because it was synthetic. It collapsed because trust, once broken, doesn't recover. Ranked 14th, green amethyst, the gem that was never allowed to be. Some stones fall when the science changes. Others fall when the dictionary catches up. For a time, it sounded luxurious. Green amethyst, a phrase that echoed familiarity and freshness in the same breath. Amethyst is long associated with royalty and is known for its metaphysical, calming properties. And now, a green version? Jewelry stores leaned in. TV shopping networks wrapped it in mystery. Catalogs compared it to the green of jade or peridot, but insisted this was different. This was amethyst, just reborn, except it wasn't. Genuine amethyst is purple, by definition. The word comes from the Greek amethystos, not drunk, referencing the wine-like color of the stone. What was sold as green amethyst was actually heat-treated quartz, almost always originating from Brazil, where large quantities of amethyst were exposed to controlled thermal processes. At a specific temperature range, Often between 470 degrees Celsius and 500 degrees Celsius, the iron content inside the quartz altered chemically, and the purple faded into green. The result was visually appealing, durable, and affordable to produce. What made it expensive was the name, and for a while that name worked. Between 2005 and 2012, green amethyst was promoted across North America, featured in mass-market collections and even some semi-luxury lines. Prices climbed, not because of rarity or difficulty, but because of branding confusion. Then came the correction. Gemologists pushed back. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, issued a statement clarifying that green amethyst is a misnomer, as amethyst, by definition, must be purple. The Gemological Institute of America, GIA, no longer accepts that label. Wholesalers relabeled their stock as prasiolite, and customers realized they had been paying premium prices for what was, in effect, reheated quartz. The collapse was swift. Retailers dropped the term. Consumers stopped searching for it. What was once sold for $80 to $100 per carat is now traded wholesale for below $5, if at all. Prasiolite still exists. It's still beautiful, but its marketing edge was permanently revoked the moment the industry decided to call things what they truly were. Ranked 13th, turquoise, the market flood that poisoned the well. Turquoise was never the rarest gem, but for over 3,000 years it carried status beyond supply. Egypt, Persia, Mesoamerica, and Tibet, civilizations traded and wore turquoise for protection, status, or tribute. In the United States, it became something else, a symbol of place, the high desert, Navajo silverwork, rodeo belt buckles. By the early 2000s, it wasn't just a stone, it was an identity, a lifestyle, a billion-dollar trend. And that's when the market broke. Global demand surged, but American mines, Sleeping Beauty, Bisbee, Morenci, number 8, couldn't meet the output required. The result? An open door for substitutes. At first, dealers used low-grade turquoise, porous, off-color, too soft for cutting. They injected it with resin and wax, added color dyes, and stabilized the surface. Sometimes they used an authentic turquoise base. Other times they skipped it altogether, turning to howlite or magnesite, which could mimic the matrix in texture if appropriately dyed. And then came the labels: genuine turquoise, natural stone, stabilized only for durability. To the average buyer, there was no difference. The supply chain had little regulation. Retailers, and especially those online or catering to tourists, flooded the market with blue and green cabochons that looked the part but weren't. By 2012, whispers turned into industry alerts. Independent gemologists began publishing test results. The Gemological Institute of America, GIA, revised their turquoise identification protocols. The American Gem Trade Association, AGTA, released papers on the topic of misrepresentation. Dealers in Santa Fe and Albuquerque began acid testing inventory live in front of customers and finding blue dye on the tissue. The backlash didn't just hurt fakes. It pulled the floor out from underneath the entire turquoise ecosystem. Untreated American turquoise, once valued at $20 to $30 per carat wholesale, saw buyers walk away unless the mine origin was laser-etched into the certificate. Stones from Iran and Tibet were viewed with doubt unless accompanied by direct export verification. Even turquoise-backed Native American artisan pieces lost resale value unless documented with untreated provenance. By 2018, the damage was complete. Turquoise hadn't disappeared, but its meaning had fractured. It was no longer about the color, it was about the paperwork. Ranked 12th. Mozambique Ruby, from global darling to saturated collapse. When Topaz was discovered, the ruby market reset. Decades of dependency on Myanmar, with its politics, limitations, and inconsistent supply, were broken almost overnight. Mozambique offered something new: stability, scale, and color. By 2013, every major player, from auction houses to retailers, was recalibrating their ruby strategies around one word: Africa. What the stones lacked in historical mystique, They compensated for in clarity, consistency, and volume. Gemfields, the British mining group managing Topaz, doubled down, implementing auction systems, grading transparency, and sustainability PR. At first it worked exceptionally well. Between 2014 and 2017, Mozambique Ruby became the flagship gemstone of the modern supply chain. Catalogs described it as the Burma of the future. Collectors lined up. Jewelry brands, from Van Cleef to David Yurman, introduced Mozambique Ruby collections. Investors entered with a simple thesis. Prices could only rise. And for a while they did. High-end, untreated stones set records. The 25.59 carat Sunrise Ruby, Mozambique origin, sold for over $30 million. Private auctions in Geneva and Hong Kong confirmed the trend. African rubies were now considered elite. However, markets don't stand still in time. As exploration expanded, Topaz flooded the pipeline. By 2018, tens of thousands of carats of medium-grade, heat-treated rubies were moving monthly, from Maputo to Bangkok to Guangzhou. Gemfields kept auctioning parcels. Cutters kept buying, until they couldn't. Warehouses filled with 1 to 3 carat stones that once sold for $2,500 per carat are now struggling to fetch $800. Retailers quietly pulled Mozambique Ruby from front windows. Consumers started asking, is it Burmese? And when the answer was no, the perceived value dropped. It wasn't because the material was flawed, it was because the middle collapsed. And when the middle collapses, the top and bottom collapse as well. The impact wasn't immediate. It seeped through the system slowly. By 2020, inventory turnover stalled. By 2022, even wholesale dealers in Thailand were refusing to restock Mozambique rubies unless they were 5 carats or more, untreated and accompanied by premium certification. Meanwhile, mid-tier investors, many of whom had purchased polished stones through private vaults or boutique dealers between 2015 and 2018, were left with assets that had no secondary liquidity. Galleries offered buyback at a 60 to 70% loss. Some buyers were told bluntly, "We're not taking Mozambique right now." Today, the mine continues to operate. Gemfields still reports auction revenues. However, the belief that Mozambique rubies were the guaranteed successors to the Burmese legacy has vanished. Only exceptional stones continue to command a premium. Everything else? It's there, but it doesn't lead anymore. Ranked 11th. Mystic Topaz, the rainbow that wouldn't last. At first, it looked like something new. Mystic Topaz, a stone that shimmered with every hue in the visible spectrum. Green to violet, blue to magenta. The surface changed with light, the movement, the setting. By the early 2000s, it had become ubiquitous. Jewelry shows on television called it space age. Retailers priced it higher than blue topaz. Online stores labeled it exotic, and customers believed it because it looked different from anything else in their jewelry box. But none of the color came from the mineral itself. Mystic Topaz is not a natural gem variety. It begins with colorless topaz, one of the most abundant and affordable gemstones on the market. Using a method called chemical vapor deposition, CVD, a thin layer of titanium is applied to the surface. The result is an optical illusion, a coating so thin that light interferes with it, producing a rainbow-like play of color. But that surface layer, like a soap bubble, was fragile, scratching, heat, cleaning chemicals. Even ordinary wear could damage the coating, leaving behind patches of the dull, colorless base stone. At first, none of this was disclosed clearly. For years, Mystic Topaz was sold under soft terms: enhanced, futuristic, advanced surface brilliance. However, most customers, and many salespeople, were unaware of its meaning. Some thought it was a rare new variety of topaz. Others believed it was naturally iridescent. Few understood it was a post-treatment optical effect with a limited lifespan. By 2010, the story changed. The Gemological Institute of America, GIA, has published guidance clarifying that Mystic Topaz is a treated product with no natural counterpart. Collector forums began documenting how quickly the coating wore off. Resale platforms, including eBay and Etsy, added filters for coated versus natural gems. Some jewelers issued internal memos banning Mystic Topaz from new production. Retail collapsed faster than expected. Once selling for $50 to $80 per carat in mall displays, Mystic Topaz dropped to under $5 or was liquidated in bulk lots online. Inventory moved from department stores to clearance racks, then to low-end tourist kiosks. But the collapse didn't stop at Mystic Topaz. It cast doubt over the entire topaz category. Buyers started asking whether blue topaz was irradiated, and for how long. Dealers hesitated to stock colorless topaz, fearing the association. Even imperial topaz, a rare, natural variety, saw reduced demand in U.S. markets due to confusion and mistrust. Today, Mystic Topaz still exists. It's still produced and still sold. But never again as something rare. Never again as something lasting. Its rise was built on an illusion of innovation. Its fall began the moment the coating scratched off. Ranked 10th. Chrome Chalcedony, the gem that disappeared without a fight. When chrome chalcedony entered the gem trade, it arrived quietly but with promise. A vivid green, naturally colored by chromium, translucent like fine jade, polished like quartz. And unlike dyed chalcedony, it required no enhancement, no treatment, no manipulation. Dealers called it Zimbabwe green. Marketing tested the phrase emerald chalcedony. For a moment, this African stone might finally claim a consistent place in global gem circuits. But it never did. The only known source was Mashava, Zimbabwe, a region better known for its asbestos and copper, rather than fine gems. There was no primary mine, no large volume cutting operation. Material entered the market in trickles, irregular, undocumented, and often mixed with lower grade material. Jewelers liked the color. Collectors appreciated the chemical purity, but wholesalers couldn't build a pipeline on hope. Between 2005 and 2012, chrome chalcedony was featured in design catalogs, QVC specials, and niche exhibitions. But it never broke through. It never made it to high jewelry, never showed up at Sotheby's, and no gemological lab issued prestige grading scales for it. Worse, the name itself lacked clarity. Some called it green chrysoprase. Others used Zimbabwe jade. A few tried branding it African emerald quartz. However, without a global consensus and without visible leadership from the mining sector, the stone fell through the cracks. By 2015, demand had dried up. Consumers chasing color turned to Paraíba, tourmaline, Savorit, and neon apatite. Retailers seeking transparency dropped lesser-known quartz altogether. Chrome chalcedony, although still available in limited quantities, has lost its pricing power. Once sold for $20 to $30 per carat, it's now listed under generic quartz bundles for a fraction of that. No scandal, no overmining, no lawsuit, just silence. A product without scale, without champions, and without momentum. And in the world of gemstones, even beauty needs a strategy. Ranked 9th. Black Star Diopside, the gem that couldn't hold its shape. For decades, gem buyers searched for stones that shimmered, not with color, but with light itself. Starstones, gems that displayed asterism, lines or rays of light crossing over the surface, like celestial formations frozen in crystal. For those who couldn't afford sapphire, garnet, or spinel, there was Black Star Diopside. Discovered primarily in India's Tamil Nadu region, Black Star Diopside promised the magic of a star at a fraction of the price. It was pitch black, cabochon cut, and in the right light showed a clear four-rayed star, formed by aligned magnetite inclusions under surface reflection. Retailers promoted it as the accessible asterism gem. Spiritual stores linked it to grounding energy and cosmic alignment. It sold widely through QVC, metaphysical markets, and tourist channels across the U.S. and Southeast Asia. But soon the question started. Under fluorescent lighting, nothing appeared. In natural light, the star vanished unless the angle was perfect. Many customers returned stones, confused or disappointed. The sales staff blamed bad lighting, cloudy days, and incorrect focus. But gemologists knew the truth. Black Star Diopside's star only works under ideal directional light. With precise polish, in a still viewer. And most of the inventory on the market didn't meet those conditions. Cutting quality was inconsistent. Many stones were misaligned. The dome too flat, the inclusions too sparse, the polish too poor. The effect that was meant to be the star of the stone didn't show up. At the same time, the physical softness of the stone, Mohs approximately 5.5 to 6, made it poor for everyday wear. Scratches dulled the surface. Over months, the stones lost their luster. The star faded entirely. No high jewelry house ever adopted it. No gem lab issued prestige reports. There was no secondary market. By 2012, mainstream catalogs dropped it. Collectors moved on. Retailers replaced it with more stable, low-cost gems, including black spinel, onyx, and synthetic cat's eye quartz. Diopside, once sold at $25 to $40 per carat in small settings, became difficult to sell at $3, even for Beryllonite grade. What remained were spiritual shops, resellers, and gem show booths offering the last of the bulk purchase stock. No one faked it. No one fought to save it. It just dimmed. Today, Black Star Diopside serves as a case study in gemology schools, market history discussions, and behind-the-scenes trade talks. It wasn't the worst stone. It simply wasn't strong enough, optically, physically, or commercially, to stay in orbit. Ranked 8th, quartz with gold, the gem that cost more than its metal. Quartz with gold was never meant to be a gemstone. It began as a miner's find, a specimen pulled from hard rock mines in California, Alaska, or the Australian outback. A chunk of milky or clear quartz, laced with bright threads or flakes of visible gold. Collectors bought them raw, museums displayed them, but no one cut them, yet. That changed in the early 2000s. Jewelers saw potential. They took transparent sections, polished them into cabochons, and marketed them under new names. Golden quartz, trapped treasure, crystallized wealth. Online platforms amplified the effect. Dramatic lighting, macro photography, and promises of investment. Buyers were told they were holding natural combinations of two timeless materials, crystal and gold. What they weren't told was that the gold content was often less than 0.02 grams, invisible on a scale, impossible to extract, and entirely decorative. Pieces were priced not by carat or gold weight, but by perceived uniqueness. $300 for a pendant with less than $2 worth of gold, $800 for a cabochon with no provenance. Some sellers claimed to have rare Alaskan gold, although the source was often unverified Chinese or Kazakh quartz. By 2016, the market reached saturation. Gem shows, Etsy shops, and Instagram sellers flooded the space with look-alike material. Then came the fakes, clear quartz with gold foil glued to the back, resin composites with suspended pyrite flakes, gold dust inclusions that turned out to be mica, or paint labs refused to issue gem reports. Auction houses declined to list the material, and once buyers realized they'd paid $400 for a decorative stone with zero secondary liquidity, demand collapsed. The fallout wasn't loud, no lawsuits, no exposés, just an empty inbox on resale listings, a growing number of unsold pendants, and a quiet reclassification of the material, from rare gem to curio specimen. Today, genuine quartz with native gold still exists, and in the mineral collecting circles, it is highly valued. But in jewelry, it's faded into the category of forgotten experiments. Not fake, not worthless, just never what it pretended to be. Ranked 7th, glass-filled ruby, when half the stone wasn't ruby at all. This is the story of a glass-filled ruby, not a fake stone, but a genuine ruby that collapsed under the weight of misunderstanding, mishandling, and mislabeling. For decades, Thailand has been one of the world's leading centers for ruby cutting. The corundum that arrived in Bangkok, from Myanmar, Mozambique, or Madagascar, passed through the hands of generations of skilled workers. But not all rubies were equal. Much of what arrived was heavily fractured, low-grade material, too broken to facet, too cloudy to polish. The industry saw waste, then someone saw potential. In the early 2000s, a new technique emerged in tie cutting houses. The stones were heated, then injected with lead glass, a material with a refractive index similar to ruby. The molten glass seeped into cracks, solidified, and transformed cloudy corundum into something that looked vibrant, whole, and valuable. The results were dramatic. For the first time, worthless ruby rough became bright, eye-clean gems. Jewelry manufacturers bought by the kilo. Stones once considered scrap are now sold for hundreds of dollars, sometimes more, simply because they looked right. But they weren't. Most of the visual improvement came not from the ruby, but from the glass inside it. In many cases, up to 60% of the visible volume was lead glass, not crystal structure. And while the stones could be set, they couldn't be repaired, cleaned with acid, or put in ultrasonic machines. They cracked under the heat, chipped under minor pressure, and once the surface wore down, the illusion faded. At the retail level, few knew what they were selling. Stones were labeled vaguely, enhanced ruby, treated, or heat. Certificates, when issued, were based on limited testing or outdated standards. Consumers bought what they thought were natural rubies, at prices far above what glass composite stones were worth. By 2012, industry labs began to push back. The Gemological Institute of America, GIA, developed strict testing for glass-filled rubies. A GTA and ICA released warnings. By 2014, several lawsuits had been filed by customers who had paid thousands for rubies that shattered in cleaning trays or lost their color in store lights. Retailers pulled the product, suppliers scrambled to relabel, and international labs began using a new classification: composite ruby, glass-filled, not suitable for traditional grading. The collapse was sharp. Prices dropped over 80% for small sizes. Mid-tier jewelry chains exited the category. Even high-end retailers began adding disclaimers to ruby listings to avoid legal liability. Today, glass-filled rubies still exist. They're legal. They're real, but no longer respected. They're sold in tourist markets, flea shows, and liquidation bins, often ungraded, unguaranteed, and unresellable. These stones didn't collapse because they were synthetic. They collapsed because they pretended to be whole, but we were only ever part ruby and part glass. Ranked 6th, Hydrophane Opal, the stone that changed when touched. There was no fraud, no fake material, no undisclosed treatment, only a gemstone that did precisely what its chemistry said it would do, and still couldn't survive the market. In 2008, a new opal deposit was discovered in the Wollo province of Ethiopia. The stones were breathtaking. Vibrant reds, greens, and violets that rivaled the best of Lightning Ridge. However, unlike Australian opals, these were affordable, readily available, and cut in large quantities. Within just 5 years, they had transformed the global opal market. Jewelers rushed to feature them. Buyers called them rainbow flame opals. TV networks sold thousands. On Etsy, the term Wello opal appeared in tens of thousands of listings. They were sold as natural, untreated, and high-vibrancy stones. And that was mostly true. However, one thing no one discussed, or didn't fully understand, was the term hydrophane. Hydrophane opals are porous. They absorb water, sometimes up to 15% of their total mass. And when they do, they change. A stone that looked bright and fiery one day, it could become milky, cloudy, or yellowed the next day, depending on humidity, exposure, and temperature. Some turn transparent in water. Some change color after 10 minutes in the steam. Some cracked after being taken from a cold room into sunlight. Buyers didn't understand. Sellers rarely explained. Most customers assumed they were getting something as durable as Australian opal. They weren't. By 2015, problems surfaced globally. In the US, complaints to small jewelers began to increase. My opal turned dull. I wore it once, and it cracked. It's not the same color as the one I bought. I soaked it, and now it looks like glass. On Chinese e-commerce sites, returns spiked. Wholesale dealers in Bangkok began warning retailers, do not clean these in ultrasonic machines. Some brands issued internal bans. No Wello opal in bridal rings. No exposure to solvents or UV. must be stored in humid cotton. By 2017, the decline was evident. Major gemological labs updated their reports. GIA and SSEF started marking hydration sensitive on documents. Some labs refused to grade them at all unless they were stabilized. In auctions, Ethiopian opals were excluded or bundled in mixed lots. Even skilled cutters began refusing to work the material. Too many stones were shattered during the polishing process. Too many buyers requested refunds. Prices for stones under 3 carats collapsed by 70 to 90%. Even neon color stones, once $500 per carat, were now sold at $30 to $40 per carat wholesale, with disclaimers. Retailers quietly rotated them out, shifting focus back to sapphire, spinel, or tourmaline. Hydrophane opal didn't collapse because it was cheap. It collapsed because it behaved in ways buyers weren't prepared to accept. Even if it was completely natural, today it still glows, still sells, still mesmerizes the eye. But few call it an heirloom. Even fewer wear it twice. Ranked 5th, Blue Moonstone, the name that outlived the gem. Not every gemstone falls because it was replaced. Some fall because too many things started calling themselves the same name. There was a time when Blue Moonstone from Sri Lanka was considered untouchable, fine-grained, semi-transparent, a silken white body with a glowing electric blue shimmer floating beneath the surface. It wasn't common, it wasn't cheap, but for decades it had a place in Art Nouveau jewelry, museum collections, and gem exhibitions across London, Paris, and Tokyo. The mines in Media Goda produced small quantities of minerals. Stones over 5 carats were rare. Clean pieces with full-surface adulorescence were even rarer. By the early 2000s, boutique jewelers began reviving Moonstone, framing it as vintage, lunar, and mystical. The phrase Blue Moonstone became synonymous with timeless softness. Prices rose, collectors followed, and for a while the stone regained its throne. Then something changed, not in the mine but in the market. White labradorite from Madagascar, a feldspar cousin, entered the supply chain. It was cheaper, it was softer in look, but under bright lights it gave off a similar blue sheen, enough to pass for Moonstone in online photos and even in store counters. Retailers adopted the term Rainbow Moonstone. Others used Blue Moonstone loosely, applying it to any feldspar that showed flickers of color. Consumers couldn't tell the difference. Most sellers didn't explain, and slowly the identity of genuine Sri Lankan Blue Moonstone began to fade, not from scarcity, but from substitution. By 2017, the damage was apparent. Collectors were returning stones. Appraisers issued disclaimers stating, "Feldspar variety not confirmed." Prices dropped, not because of overmining, but because no one trusted the name anymore. What was once $300 per case dropped to $40 per case. Stones from Madagascar flooded Etsy, Amazon, and Alibaba. Sri Lankan material disappeared, not geologically but economically. Today the mines still exist. The real stones still exist. But the label, Blue Moonstone, no longer guarantees them. It once meant a place. Now it means a category. And that's where the collapse began. Ranked 4th, Zultanite, the gem that sold a story too soon. Zultanite appeared almost out of nowhere. By the mid-2000s, collectors and jewelry buyers started hearing whispers of a new gemstone. One that shifted colors under different lights, came from a single mountain in Turkey, and bore the name of an empire, the Zultanite. It was elegant, subtle, and marketed as the untouched miracle of the Anatolian highlands. Under sunlight, it looked pale green. Under candlelight, it took on a soft pink-bronze hue. Unheated, untreated, available only from one source, and backed by a carefully controlled brand narrative. Gem shows in Las Vegas, Hong Kong, and Doha promoted it as the next Tanzanite. For a few years it worked. The price climbed. Videos were made. TV shopping networks aired full specials. The story sold hard. But then came the reality. Zultanite was beautiful, but fragile. With a Mohs hardness of around 6.5 and perfect cleavage, it shattered under careless handling. Jewelers began to hesitate, Designers limited it to earrings and pendants, avoiding rings altogether. And then came the second hit, dye spore from other countries. Gemologists confirmed similar material from Afghanistan, Brazil, and even Russia, sometimes more saturated, sometimes cheaper. Suddenly, Zultanite was no longer exclusive. It was just a trademark. The final blow came from the customers themselves. Many couldn't see the color change unless the lighting was perfect. Some saw no difference at all. Return rates increased. Review sections filled with polite disappointment. The myth couldn't hold up under showroom lights. By 2018, prices dropped from over $1,000 per carat to under $150 for standard stones. Inventory stalled, marketing dried up, and Zultanite, once poised to become a household name, faded into the background of the gem world. Today it still exists. The mine is still there. The material is still geologically rare. But the brand collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. It wasn't the stone's fault. It just couldn't become the story it was asked to carry. Ranked third, Beryllonite, the gem that was too clear to matter. It's colorless. It's soft. It doesn't glow. And it never even reached the auction floor. Beryllonite was first identified in 1888 in Stoneham, Maine, a locality more known for feldspar than for anything of gemological interest. The discovery was logged, classified, and that's where the story nearly ended. Chemically, it's sodium beryllium phosphate, NaBePO4, and structurally it forms short, tabular crystals. However, unlike other phosphate minerals, such as apatite or lazulite, which found limited traction in jewelry, Beryllonite lacked even the hint of commercial potential. Its hardness barely reaches 5.5 on the Mohs scale, which means it scratches easily. Its transparency is excellent, but it's completely lacking in body color, pleochroism, or dispersion. It is, by all practical definitions, optically bland. Yet for a brief window in the 1990s, Beryllonite surfaced again, not in jewelry stores, but at mineral shows. Dealers in Brazil and Pakistan began offering small parcels of rough, usually under 2 grams. A few factors tried to give it life. The results were clean, precision-cut gems that no collector could price. They couldn't be insured, they couldn't be set, and they couldn't justify their cost per carat in a world already flooded with white topaz and goshenite. Attempts to market Beryllonite as a collector's rarity fell flat. It lacked the branding of musgravite, the mystique of germegevite, or the optical fireworks of colorless zircon. It had no myth, no tragedy, no aristocrat who wore it. Even museum curators struggled to justify a display. Most institutions that hold a sample of Beryllonite do so only because it completes a phosphate mineral series, not because of any visual or cultural merit. From a geological perspective, Beryllonite is fragile in more ways than one. The crystals fracture easily during transport and degrade upon exposure to heat or sudden changes in humidity. For factors, this means a high loss ratio. For collectors, it means storage, not display. And so it sits, in drawers, in flats, in the back rooms of collections, labeled, cataloged, and eternally ignored. Today, a 3-carat faceted Beryllonite will struggle to fetch even $30 if you can find someone who knows what it is. No gemstone analyst tracks its value, no magazine features it, and no auction house will touch it, not even as filler in mixed lot sales. In an era where nearly every mineral has been inflated, hyped, or revived through social media platforms like TikTok, Etsy, or New Age rituals, Beryllonite remains unsellable. Not because it's fake, not because it's dangerous, but because nobody ever wanted it. Ranked second, color-coded cubic zirconia, the illusion that collapsed under light. While some gems fell from grace due to oversupply, others collapsed the moment light revealed what they really were. The term sounded futuristic, titanium-coated cubic zirconia. Promotional catalogs in the late 1990s billed it as a revolution. Gemstones that refracted color like mystic topaz, priced under $10 a carat and engineered for perfection. To the untrained eye, they were spectacular. Vivid blues, greens, or purples, radiating from a perfectly cut stone that mimicked diamond optics. But beneath that shimmer, they weren't gems. They were coatings, Cubic zirconia itself had already peaked in the 1980s as the dominant diamond simulant. By the 2000s, it was facing obsolescence, not just from the rise of lab-grown diamonds, but from a shift in consumer awareness. Simulant became a dirty word, and manufacturers needed something new. So they turned to color vapor deposition, a method of bonding thin metallic films to the pavilion or culet of CZs to generate vibrant colors through thin film interference. For a while it worked. Mall kiosks, online retailers, and even QVC segments began selling color fantasy or rainbow firestones. Most were coated CZs with no disclosure of the coating material. Some vendors passed them off as exotic zircon or rare topaz. Others created fake trade names, such as Aurora Zirconite, Neochroma Diamond, and Mystique Crystal. But the problems came quickly. Coatings peeled under ultrasonic cleaning. Rings lose color with wear. And most damaging of all, the coating only worked under specific lighting conditions. In broad daylight, the colors appeared muted or metallic. Under LED lights, they flared artificially. Jewelers refused to set them. Resellers dropped them. And soon the stones became the subject of dozens of FTC complaints. The final blow came not from gemologists, but from returns departments. Buyers complained of stones losing color after a few months. Jewelers returned entire batches due to surface abrasions. YouTube videos exposed how a toothbrush and alcohol could strip the gemstone to its proper form, a 0.15 cubic zirconia. By 2010, nearly every major distributor had abandoned them. What remained were liquidation bins. The very coating that made them sellable became the reason they couldn't be resold. And unlike genuine CZ, which still holds marginal value in budget jewelry, color-coded variants are now uninsurable, ungradable, and unsellable. GIA won't report on them. Auction houses won't list them. Most jewelers won't even take them for scrap. At flea markets and liquidation shows, you'll still find trays of them, once labeled mystic sapphires or fire emeralds, now tossed into plastic tubs, marked at $2 a piece or less, and nobody is buying. In first place, blue zircon, when fire wasn't enough. In the realm of natural brilliance, few stones ever rivaled blue zircon. Not synthetic, not coated, this was a gem mined from the crust of Cambodia and eastern Thailand, cut to perfection, then heat-treated to unlock its legendary fire. For over a century, it has dazzled jewelers with a refractive index second only to that of diamond. In candlelight and early electric bulbs, its glitter was unmistakable. Old European-cut zircons were once set in Edwardian rings, mistaken for diamonds, but never for long. Blue zircon had a character of its own, slightly soft, heavily birefringent, and full of double images that made it look alive. For decades, it held its ground, especially the vibrant stones from Ratnakiri, Cambodia, heated from their original brownish form to that rich teal to aqua range. It wasn't rare, but it was respected, affordable, natural, and fiery. So what went wrong? Not fraud, not fakes, just a shift in the light. The LED revolution in the early 2000s made blue zircon's fire appear chaotic. In jewelry cases lit with white LED strips, its brilliance began to resemble distortion. The same double refraction that once enchanted collectors now looked blurry. Meanwhile, consumer tastes were changing. The rise of sapphire branding, the diamond substitute market, and the emergence of lab-grown stones pushed blue zircon into an uncomfortable middle. Too soft to compete with sapphire, too complex for mass-market bridal rings, and too misunderstood for collectors. Then came the miseducation. Retailers labeled it as zirconia. Buyers confused it with synthetic cubic zirconia. Even online listings began referring to it as imitation topaz. By the mid-2000s, auction records froze. No major spikes, no revived interest. Designers stopped using it in signature collections. And even the Cambodian mines that once depended on its exports began cutting production, not from depletion, but from disinterest. Today, blue zircon sits in a paradox. Geologically fascinating, optically brilliant, chemically real, yet commercially dead. $400 per carat stones from just a decade ago now struggle to fetch $80 to $100 wholesale. Resellers can't move inventory, and GIA reports, once used to certify its authenticity, now confuse buyers more than reassure them. When the world moves on from a gem, it doesn't matter how real it is or how bright it burns. If no one wants to see it, it disappears. Value in the gemstone world is never just geological. It's cultural, it's historical, it's transactional. What we've just seen are not accidents, but patterns. Stones that rose too fast, were marketed too broadly, or relied too heavily on illusion rather than substance. Some may return, rebranded, repurposed, rediscovered. Others are now permanent footnotes in auction records and trade warnings. But the lesson remains. In a market where emotion meets minerals, clarity isn't just a property of the stone, it's what investors, collectors, and buyers must have first. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the subsequent investigation, where another gem story is waiting to be told.